The MLS has set its rules for its teams to receive investment from private equity funds. Today we're going to talk about this and we're going to talk about what lies ahead financially for the league. Welcome to Reporte 7. The MLS has set its rules for its teams to be able to receive investment from private equity funds. Why are they doing this right now and what are the challenges, the financial challenges that the league is facing? Let's talk about this. So first, the rules. In order to be able to invest in MLS teams, a private equity fund must have at least $500 million raised. No more than 25% of the fund may be owned by a single investor. Each fund may invest in up to 4 teams of the league. No single investment in a team may surpass 10% of the fund's capital, and the total of investments made by a single fund in the league cannot surpass 25% of the club's capital. Each investment must be of at least $20 million. No single investment in a team may surpass 20% of the club's equity. And finally, funds do not have a right to occupy a seat in the club's board. Those are the rules. What do I think of this? First of all, it's clear that sports teams continue to become more and more attractive for investors. And American leagues want to be ready for this trend, and they want to be ready for when money from this institution starts pouring in to their leagues. This is a stark contrast to what happens, for instance, with European soccer clubs, where they have a more of a first grab the money and then ask the questions kind of approach. So this is a very good attitude from American leagues. Now, these rules, I clearly see from the MLS an intention to find very serious partners and very serious investments. They're looking for funds which are big enough and which are diversified enough, both in their investments and in their owners, which translates to less risk of having a fund invest in the league and then having financial problems or even maybe going bankrupt, which could create a situation of uncertainty for all the clubs that it invested in. And it would also certainly reflect very poorly on the image of the league. So clearly that's what they're trying to avoid. Also, investments in the league in the MLS are not very liquid. In my opinion, they will not be very easy to resell. So that tells me that the league is looking for partners with a long-term mentality, which I think is a very good idea and can create stability for the league. The only rule which I don't like is the one that sets the limit of 4 teams per fund. I think in sports, a conflict of interest has to be avoided as much as possible. I would have set the limit at 1 team per fund, but that would seriously limit the amount of money that the league could receive from these institutions. And clearly, as we're going to see later on, clearly right now the league is looking for money, so that would defeat the purpose. I don't like this rule, but I understand the perspective of the league. So those are the rules. Now, why is the league doing this right now? Beyond the obvious fact that everyone is looking for money and the MLS is not really innovating, they're following the example of the NFL and the NBA. But I think there is more than meets the eye financially for the league, and there is a big factor motivating MLS teams to be looking for money right now, which is the fact that MLS is still far from being a profitable league. They are far from generating the revenue necessary to be self-sustainable. Let's see the situation. First of all, we have the broadcasting rights. Broadcasting rights is one of the main sources of income for any professional sports team in the world. However, this income is extremely low for MLS teams. They have an agreement in place which generates $90 million annually, which is roughly $3 million per team, which is criminally low. They are right now looking for a new agreement, and they're set to be looking for $300 million annually. But I think it is highly unlikely they will get this because of 2 reasons. First of all, that would mean an increase of more than 3 times their current agreement, and I don't think it is very realistic to get that. But second and most importantly is the fact that MLS has enormous competition. And I'm not even talking about all the other sports that dominate the industry in the United States. But just by looking at the soccer market in America, MLS has tremendous competitors. The English Premier League has just signed an agreement for $400 million annually. Spanish La Liga also has an agreement in place for $150 million annually. And Mexican Liga MX, which is the most watched league in America, We don't have the numbers for that one because the agreement is not negotiated by the league as a whole. Each team is free to pursue their own agreement, and they are not publicly disclosed. However, I calculate that something between 100 and 150 million dollars are paid for the broadcasting rights of all Mexican teams in America. So that leaves a very small piece of the soccer cake for the MLS, and MLS has not yet proved to be as attractive and as important for the market as as its competitors. So no, I don't think they're gonna get $300 million. I don't even think they get 200. I think they're gonna get something somewhere between 120 and 150 million dollars, which honestly would be a very good number. It could be an increase of over 50% from their current agreement, and it would place them at the same level of Spanish La Liga and Mexican Liga MX. But it would not be enough for the needs of the league. Don Garber, the league's commissioner, is said to be looking for the new agreement to be ready in the first quarter of the year. So we are very close to finding out if they got something, if they got the money they need, or if they failed to do that, which obviously would put more financial pressure on the league. So that's one factor. Next, we have the entry fees. The MLS has been charging the new teams that enter the competition with entry fees that have gone up to $325 million for a single franchise. This money is then divided into all the members of the league, and that way MLS teams have been making up for the income they are not generating through normal sources for sports teams. The problem is that the league has said they want to expand to up to 32 teams, which means they only have 3 more spots to sell. And after they sell those, the income generated by entry fees is effectively over. So this is another factor that can put a lot of pressure for the teams. And now finally, well, it's the impact that quarantines have had in all over the world, and MLS has been no exception. Don Garber said that just in 2020, the league suffered a loss of $1 billion, which obviously has been another factor that puts a lot of pressure in the league. So as we see, MLS teams are very motivated to find money from other sources. And those sources can very well be the private equity funds, which would be a way to get money without getting into debt, which in my opinion should be a priority for MLS owners. That way they could get money while they work on increasing the traditional sources of revenue, which obviously is not going to happen overnight. I don't see MLS teams becoming profitable at least in the short term. So I think they are very motivated to get these agreements with funds. Now, a problem I see for these agreements is the fact that MLS teams are very, very overvalued. Let's see the situation. Sportico recently revealed its valuations for sports teams. Now, there is a very interesting number and a very revealing number, and that is the relationship between value and revenue. We get that number from dividing the value of a team between the revenue it generates in a year. That number for the NFL, for instance, is 6. So, in other words, an NFL team is worth 6 times what it generates, the money it generates in a year. Now, if we look at that factor for the MLS, the number is 12. That is extremely high. That is twice the NFL. That number for the Premier League is 4. And if we look at the NBA, which is the second highest, the number is 7. So, for me, this tells us 2 things. First of all, that the MLS teams are very overvalued. And second, that they are still far from generating the income they need in order to be a self-sustainable league. And the problem is that I doubt that many investors will be eager to invest in an overpriced asset. Now, it is true, these valuations are not official numbers, they are not set by the teams, so funds and teams do not have to adhere to these numbers to negotiate. However, if MLS owners are taking these valuations as reference, or if they have similar numbers in mind, they will have to accept discounts in their valuations in order to receive investments from these funds, which I think will be a very painful reality check for MLS. But I think these teams are very motivated to get these investments, so I do think we will be seeing this situation. Now, finally, a factor I think is going to motivate funds to invest in MLS is the fact that we are 4 years away from the World Cup in the United States, and that means the hype around soccer in America is only going to increase in the coming years, and many people will want to capitalize on that. And a way to do this is to be a stakeholder in the league. Many people seem to believe that the increase of interest in soccer in America caused by the World Cup will cause a lasting effect on the increase of interest in the Major League Soccer. I think my point of view is that that is debatable, because in the end, if you don't build an attractive league and if you don't engage with your local fan base, the World Cup will come and go and you will not be able to capitalize on that. But some people certainly seem to think that will be the case, and that's why we're seeing people pay more than $300 million just for the privilege of participating in the MLS. So that's the situation for the MLS. It is certainly very, very interesting. MLS has enjoyed a tremendous growth over the last decades, and we seem to think of MLS as a league that's here to stay. But I think that's far from being the case. Honestly, I think the MLS. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say the MLS will be fighting for its life in the coming years, in their search to become a profitable and self-sustainable league. Certainly, it's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out from the money perspective. And that's my opinion. That's the situation for the MLS right now. What do you think about this? What do you think about the future and the challenges lying ahead for MLS? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I appreciate that you like it and that you subscribe to the channel. And I'll talk to you next week. Have a great weekend. Take care.